Have you ever paused to truly consider how your brain, this astonishing 20-watt organ nestled within your skull, manages to effortlessly make sense of a world that's constantly bombarding it with chaotic, unpredictable information?
It's quite something, isn't it? A feat of biological engineering we often just take for granted, but it's happening every single moment.
Exactly. But what if there was, a deeper unifying principle, a kind of grand theory that could explain not just how your brain navigates this complexity, but how any living thing, from a microscopic bacterium all the way up to an entire bustling society, manages to maintain its very existence and interact meaningfully with its environment?
That's moving beyond just a philosophical question, really. It's a profound scientific challenge. It invites us to shift our perspective, right? To look beyond just neurons or organs.
And see the underlying mechanics.
Yes, the fundamental mechanics of persistence, self-organization, and this dynamic interaction that allows systems to simply endure.
And that's exactly what we're going to try and unravel today. We're diving deep into two truly groundbreaking ideas from the theoretical neuroscientist Professor Karl Friston, the free energy principle, or FEP.
And its action-oriented counterpart, active inference.
Right. Our mission here is to illuminate these core ideas, maybe simplify their sometimes daunting underlying mechanics so they're clearer and more accessible, and then really explore their far-reaching implications.
Because they touch on so much.
Absolutely. You'll see how these concepts offer a fresh, almost revolutionary perspective on everything from how we perceive reality, the nature of consciousness itself, to mental health challenges, the very process of evolution.
And even, the future of artificial intelligence. It's quite a scope.
It really is. So the goal is to give you a shortcut to being well-informed about a theory that is genuinely reshaping our understanding of life itself.
And to do that, we've gone straight to the source. Our insights are drawn directly from a fascinating collection of Professor Friston's lectures, papers, and some really in-depth interviews. So yeah, let's begin to unpack these powerful ideas. The fundamental premise, why systems exist.
Okay, so let's start at the very, very beginning with a question that sounds almost philosophical, but Friston tackles it with a really rigorous mathematical lens. Why do systems, especially living ones, exist in the way that they do? Why don't they just dissolve or dissipate into chaos?
That's the perfect starting point. We begin with the foundational concept from physics called a non-equilibrium steady state, or NESS. It sounds technical, but think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine a simple closed system, like a cup of hot coffee you leave on your desk. Eventually it cools down, right?
Yeah.
The heat disperses until it reaches a static, inert equilibrium with the room. It becomes indistinguishable from its surroundings in terms of energy flow.
Right, it just settles, no more change. That's thermodynamic equilibrium.
Exactly. But living systems are clearly different, aren't they? They don't just cool down and become inert. They're constantly in motion, constantly changing.
Always doing something.
Precisely. Living systems are what we call open systems. They're continuously exchanging energy, matter, and information with their environment. But here's the key bit. Despite this constant flux, this incoming and outgoing flow, they manage to maintain a distinct identity, a characteristic form, and a set of internal states.
Like a river. The water's always changing, but the river stays a river.
That's a great analogy. The individual water molecules are always changing, moving downstream, but the river itself, its banks, its current, its characteristic shape persists. Or think about your own body. We're constantly taking in nutrients, expelling waste, breathing.
Right, constant turnover.
But our body temperature, our blood pressure, our biological rhythms, like the sleep-wake cycle, they remain relatively stable within these, viable bounds.
And this isn't just about individual organisms, right? I understand Friston talks about this happening at multiple scales, like could be the rapid neural oscillations in your brain.
Or the rhythmic beating of your heart, your daily sleep-wake cycle.
Or even something bigger, like predator-prey cycles in an ecosystem.
Absolutely. These systems are never truly at rest, but they revisit a particular set of states over and over again. This allows them to endure through time. It's this dynamic persistence.
This continuous cyclical dynamic. You called it a solenoidal flow, like a whirlpool.
Yeah, that's the term he uses. Imagine a whirlpool in a stream. The individual water molecules within the whirlpool are constantly being replaced, but the structure of the whirlpool itself, its characteristic spin and shape, persists. It's never static, but it maintains its integrity through constant flow. It's this active, dynamic self-maintenance that defines living systems, that defines these non-equilibrium steady states.
Okay, so that persistence, that ability to maintain a distinct form and function despite all this constant exchange with the environment, that's absolutely key. And this brings us to what I find one of the most profound, almost mind-bending aspects of Friston's theory, the if it exists
Oh,
principle.
yes. This is central.
So, Professor Friston's free energy principle posits that if anything exists, meaning it can be distinguished from its environment and maintains its form over time, then it must, just by the very mathematics of physics and probability, appear to be constantly minimizing something called variational free energy.
And this is crucial. It's not asserting why something exists in the first place, but rather how it must behave to continue existing. It's a mathematical inevitability almost for any system that fits this description of being in a non-equilibrium steady state.
So, it's a necessary condition for persistence.
Exactly. And you can interpret this minimization of free energy as the system always trying to maximize the evidence for its own existence. It's as if every living thing, from a single cell to you and me, is continuously providing proof that it belongs, that it's viable, and that its internal model of the world is, well, good enough for its survival. This is what's meant by self-evidencing.
So it's like, remember those oil droplets in water? How they gather themselves up instead of dispersing? The very act of maintaining its distinct form is, in this framework, minimizing this free energy. Almost like it's unconsciously saying, I am here and I'm going to keep being here.
Precisely. It's not a conscious choice, obviously, but a fundamental drive baked into the physics of persistence. It's an optimization process, continually working to keep its surprise low.
Yeah.
And surprise here isn't an emotion.
Right. It's a technical term, the improbability of being in a certain state.
Exactly. From a physicist's point of view, it's like a very generalized statement of homeostasis systems are striving to keep their physiological states within viable, predictable bounds, avoiding improbable, existence-threatening conditions.
So consider what that means for us. Every breath we take, every decision, every thought, it's all, at its most fundamental level, part of this ongoing, unconscious act of our system proving its own existence.
That's the implication. It's why we fight so hard to stay alive, why we instinctively seek predictability.
Yeah.
Your very being is a continuous, undeniable statement. I exist.
That makes a lot of sense, but it raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? If everything is in this constant dynamic flux, how does a system, say my brain, even begin to draw a line around me versus not me? It seems like it would be incredibly hard to define that boundary if everything is so interconnected.
You've hit on a really critical point. And this is where Professor Friston introduces one of his most elegant conceptual tools, the Markov Blanket.
Okay, Markov Blanket. Sounds technical again.
It's borrowed from Bayesian probability theory, yeah. But the key thing to grasp is that it's not necessarily a physical boundary like your skin or the cell wall of a bacterium, though those can be Markov blankets. More fundamentally, it's a statistical boundary that separates a system's internal states from its external environment.
So if I'm trying to picture this for my brain, the Markov Blanket would involve things like my sensory states, what I see, hear, touch, and my active states, what I do, my movements. Are those the immediate neighbors defining this blanket?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
The Markov blanket is made up of the immediate neighbors of a system's internal states. These neighbors are its sensory states, all the information it gets from the environment, and its active states, all the actions it performs on the environment. And what's really crucial here is that these blanket states, these sensory and active interfaces, contain all the information needed to predict what's happening inside the system. They effectively shield or blanket the internal states from direct, unmediated influence by the deep external world. It's a clever statistical way to carve out a system within this constant flow.
That sounds like it naturally leads to a kind of continuous, self-reinforcing cycle, like my internal thoughts or beliefs lead to actions.
Your active state.
Right, my active states,
Yeah.
which then change the world around me. And those changes create new sensations,
Your sensory states.
which in turn affect my internal thoughts, my internal states. It's a loop, isn't it? A never-ending loop.
You've perfectly captured it. This setup naturally gives rise to a circular causality, what we often call the action-perception cycle. Your internal states influence your active states, actions. These actions change the external world. Those changes generate new sensory inputs, and those inputs influence your internal states, completing the loop.
And this applies to everything, from a simple organism to us.
It's an elegant, elemental description of how any system with a Markov blanket interacts with its environment, A single-celled organism moving towards nutrients, a human having a complex conversation. It's always about updating internal models through this continuous interaction.
What's truly fascinating, though, is this idea of generalized synchrony. You mentioned the very existence of this Markov blanket implies that the internal states of the system must achieve some kind of synchrony with the external world, even though they're not directly connected.
Yeah, it's a beautiful and quite profound consequence. While there's no direct connection between internal and deep external states, only mediated through the blanket, their dynamics become coupled. It's as if they start dancing to the same rhythm.
So if I'm making sense of the outside world by synchronizing my internal states with its patterns?
Then the outside world is also, in a way, making sense of you. It's a symmetrical, codependent process. The environment learns about its inhabitants and their regularities just as much as the inhabitants learn about their environment.
Like niche construction. Humans building roads or developing language makes the environment more predictable for us.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of niche construction viewed through this lens. As agents act to minimize their surprise, they change their environment, making it more predictable for themselves and others sharing that niche. It's a continuous, dynamic negotiation between an agent and its world, with both shaping each other over time. 2. The brain's operating system. Predictive processing and active inference.
Okay, so we've got this foundational idea. Systems exist by minimizing surprise, maintaining identity via a Markov blanket, and engaging in this action perception loop. Now, let's really zoom in on the brain itself, because this is where the free energy principle offers an incredibly powerful framework, right? Within this view, the brain isn't just passively receiving information.
Absolutely not. The brain, as Professor Friston describes it, is a fantastic organ, and he uses fantastic quite literally in the sense of generating fantasies. It's not just taking in raw data like a camera.
It's more active than that.
Much more active. It's constantly generating internal models, hypotheses, or you could say fantasies, about what's causing its sensory inference and, crucially, what will happen next.
So our reality is kind of constructed.
In a profound way, yes.
Yeah.
Our reality is perhaps best understood as a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination that our brain is continuously constructing to best explain the ambiguous sensations it receives. Think about an optical illusion your brain fills in what it expects to see, even if the raw data is weird, because it's trying to reduce the surprise of sensory input it can't immediately explain.
Okay, so it's not just taking in data and then processing it reactively. It's actively trying to predict what's coming. This sounds very much like the concept of predictive coding that's become so influential in neuroscience.
Yes, that's precisely it. At its core, the brain operates on this principle of predictive coding. It functions like a very sophisticated scientist, constantly formulating hypotheses about the world. It predicts what it expects to see, hear, or feel in the next moment, the next second, maybe even further out. When the sensory input actually arrives, it's compared to these predictions the brain generated. Any mismatch, any difference between what was predicted and what was actually sensed, produces a prediction error. And that error signal is crucial.
Because the brain's main goal then is to minimize these prediction errors.
Exactly. It wants to reduce that mismatch. It does this primarily by continuously updating its internal beliefs, its internal model of the world, to make its future predictions more accurate.
So it's like a constant refinement process. Higher brain regions send down their best guesses, their predictions.
The sending predictions.
Right, and then ascending prediction errors from the sensory inputs come up and basically say, nope, adjust that bit, fine-tuning those predictions.
That's a great way to put it. It's like a scientific experiment, always running, always trying to reduce the difference between its hypothesis and its observations. This feedback loop is relentless. The brain is always trying to converge on the best, most efficient explanation for its sensory data, the simplest model that can still accurately predict what's coming in. Hypothesis testing, constantly.
Okay, but updating beliefs is only half the story, isn't it? This is where active inference comes in, tying action directly to this predictive process. The brain doesn't just sit there passively updating its internal model.
No, it actively intervenes. It also acts upon the world in order to minimize prediction errors. This is a really key insight.
So many of our movements, even simple reflexes, could be seen as ways to make our predictions come true. Like, if I predict, I'll pick up this pen.
Your hand reaches out to grasp it.
And the sensation of my fingers closing around the pen confirms my prediction, making it a reality. My action fulfilled the prediction.
Precisely. It's action in the service of perception, or more accurately, action in the service of confirming predictions. But active inference goes a crucial step further than just minimizing surprise right now.
All right.
Agents don't just minimize surprise in the moment. They actively try to minimize expected free energy over time. And this expected free energy is a sophisticated blend of two crucial imperatives that drive pretty much all behavior.
What are they?
First, maximizing the expected value of future outcomes, essentially, striving to get what you want, reaching preferred states, achieving goals, and second, maximizing information gain, actively resolving uncertainty about the world by seeking out new informative data.
Ah, okay. That second part, maximizing information gain, that sounds like it provides a really fundamental explanation for curiosity, doesn't it?
It really does. If you want to minimize expected surprise over the long term, you have to seek out data that resolves your uncertainty about how the world works. So, as Friston puts it, to be an agent is to be curious.
Wow. So curiosity isn't just some pleasant human trait. It's a fundamental imperative baked into how active, self-organizing systems have to behave to persist and thrive. That's quite elegant.
It is. And it also neatly solves a philosophical puzzle known as the dark room problem.
Oh, I've heard of this. The idea is if the brain just wants to minimize surprise, why doesn't it just, find a dark, quiet room and stay there forever? Minimal input, minimal surprise.
Exactly. It seems logical on the surface. But active inference explains why that doesn't happen. Minimizing expected surprise involves actively engaging with the world to gather information that reduces uncertainty about your model, not just passively avoiding stimulation.
So a curious agent doesn't just want to avoid surprise. It wants to resolve the most uncertainty about its hypotheses, and that often requires going out and exploring.
Precisely. It's about being right about the world in the long run, which requires sampling it, not just being quiet in the short run. You seek out the data that will best distinguish between your competing hypotheses about how things work.
And underpinning all of this is some fascinating mathematics, even if we simplify it. The free energy principle, by its very nature, seems to embrace Occam's principle, right? Driving systems towards simpler explanations.
Yes, it inherently does. It drives systems to find the simplest, most parsimonious explanations, what Friston calls generative models, for their sensory data, the ones that can predict the data accurately without being overly complex.
And why is simplicity so important?
It's crucial for generalization. The ability to apply what you've learned in one situation to new, unseen situations. Think about a child learning about dogs. If their model's too specific, like only fluffy white things that bark are dogs, it's overly complex and won't generalize to, say, a German Shepherd.
It overfits the initial data.
Exactly. But if their model is simpler, capturing the essence of dogness, forelegs, tail barks, etc., it allows them to recognize new dogs they've never seen before. Overly complex models fail to generalize, which is a huge problem in machine learning too. The FEP naturally pushes towards simpler, more robust, generalizable explanations.
Now, there's another aspect that seems a bit counterintuitive. While FEP minimizes surprise, you mentioned it also involves maximizing entropy within the system's own model, keeping options open.
Yeah, it does sound paradoxical at first glance. Minimizing surprise sounds like seeking certainty, while maximizing entropy sounds like embracing uncertainty. But it's vital for adaptability. Think of the entropy of your model as its flexibility, or the spread of your beliefs. If your beliefs become too sharp or rigid, if your model has very low entropy, you become overly certain about things. And that can be really dangerous when the world is inherently uncertain and always changing.
Like being absolutely sure there's only one way to solve a problem.
Exactly. You might fail catastrophically when the circumstances change even slightly. Maximizing the entropy of your model within the overall constraint of minimizing surprise means maintaining a certain level of uncertainty or flexibility. It allows for exploration, for learning, for dealing with novel situations without getting completely stuck. It means you are, in a sense, compelled to keep your options open, to remain viable and adaptive.
And how does the brain actually build these incredibly complex models that allow for all this constant prediction and adaptation? It seems like a monumental task.
It does. The brain constructs what are called deep generative models. Think of them as hierarchical structures, like layers of an onion, where different levels operate on different time scales and handle different levels of abstraction.
So lower levels deal with immediate stuff.
Right. Lower levels might deal with fast, immediate sensory details, the precise pattern of light hitting your retina right now, the specific frequency of a sound wave.
And higher levels.
Moving up the hierarchy, you find levels that process slower, more abstract patterns. Things like recognizing the overall shape of an object, then maybe identifying it as a face, then understanding the facial expression, then comprehending the language being spoken, and even grasping abstract social norms or intentions.
So each higher level provides context for the levels below it.
Exactly. It provides constraints and priors. This hierarchical depth is what allows the brain to compress an abstract meaning from incredibly high-dimensional, noisy sensory inputs. It's how we turn this blooming, buzzing confusion of raw sensory data into recognizable concepts, coherent narratives, and meaningful understanding of the world around us. It's how we go from pixels to perception. 3. Implications across domains, from mind to society.
Okay, so if this principle is so fundamental, underpinning existence and brain function, what are the implications beyond that? Where does this framework lead us in understanding ourselves, maybe mental health, and even the future of technology? Let's start with psychopathology, mental health, and therapy.
This is definitely one of the most powerful and, I think, clinically relevant applications of active inference. Many psychiatric conditions you could think of, eating disorders like anorexia, body dysmorphia, maybe even paranoia, hallucinations and psychosis, can potentially be understood as failures of belief updating, or, to use Friston's term, as false inferences.
Meaning the brain generates explanations for its sensations that are plausible, maybe even internally consistent, but ultimately maladaptive or just wrong.
Precisely. The brain, in its relentless drive to minimize surprise, settles on a best explanation that might be deeply flawed relative to the actual state of the world, but it sticks with it.
So someone with anorexia might have a deeply ingrained, overly precise false inference, a strong belief that they are overweight, regardless of sensory evidence to the contrary. And that belief drives their behavior.
Exactly. The internal model, the prior belief, is so strong, so precise, that it essentially overrides or explains away contradictory sensory evidence. From this perspective, something like schizophrenia could be understood perhaps as a disconnection syndrome.
A problem with communication between brain regions.
Yes, a dysfunction in the coordination and message passing, specifically linked to potential failures in what's called cortical gain control.
Gain control, like volume knobs.
Kind of. Imagine your brain has internal volume knobs or dials for different signals. One dial controls how much weight or precision you give to what you expect to happen in your prior beliefs. Another controls how much weight or precision you give to what you're actually sensing right now, the prediction error signal. Cortical gain control is about the proper calibration of these knobs.
So in schizophrenia, these knobs might be miscalibrated.
That's one hypothesis. Perhaps an over-reliance on internal predictions, priors, and a reduced precision assigned to sensory input, prediction errors. This could potentially lead to things like hallucinations, where internal predictions are experienced as if they were real external stimuli, or paranoia, where ambiguous events are interpreted through the lens of overly strong, potentially threatening prior beliefs.
And this ties into the role of neuromodulators like dopamine and serotonin, right? They act like these very gain knobs in the brain.
That's a key part of the story, yes. They influence the precision or confidence assigned to different signals, prediction errors versus prior beliefs. Dopamine, for example, is often implicated in signaling the precision of prediction errors, essentially flagging, pay attention, this is important new information. Oxytocin might modulate the precision of social cues.
So when this neuromodulatory gain control system goes awry, the delicate balance between prediction and reality testing is disturbed.
Exactly. The brain's ability to accurately infer the causes of its sensations gets compromised. This could be because beliefs become too rigid and resistant to evidence, or too unstable and easily swayed. And this understanding offers a clear potential framework for thinking about therapeutic interventions.
So therapy, from this viewpoint, could be seen as helping people reskill themselves in how to manage attention, how to maybe attenuate or ignore certain unhelpful signals or attend more to others, and how to properly weight new information against their existing beliefs.
Precisely. It's about recalibrating those gain controls, helping the brain become more flexible and adaptive in its inference process. Understanding the molecular biology behind this precision encoding means that interventions, whether psychological therapies or pharmacotherapy, could potentially aim to relax the constraints of overly precise and perhaps false beliefs.
Allowing individuals to explore new ways of being, new interpretations.
Yes, opening up the possibility space.
And this is where things like psychedelic compounds have entered the conversation recently, isn't it? The idea that they might work by temporarily reducing the precision of high-level prior beliefs.
That's a very active and exciting area of research, absolutely. The hypothesis, often framed within the FEP, is that certain psychedelics might temporarily flatten the free energy landscape of the brain.
Flattened landscape.
Meaning those deep ingrained canals or pathways of thought, those rigid, high-precision beliefs we hold about ourselves and the world, become temporarily less fixed, less deep. This allows for a more flexible, higher entropy state where new connections and perspectives can emerge.
Which could be therapeutic for conditions where people feel really stuck, like trauma, addiction, maybe depression or grief.
That's the hope. By enabling a temporary relaxation of those rigid priors, it might allow for a profound shift in perspective, helping to break free from maladaptive patterns of thought and behavior. It's like temporarily shaking up the snow globe of the mind, allowing the patterns to settle in a potentially more adaptive way.
And even something more common like a phobia fits this model too, right? The fear maintains itself.
Perfectly. If you have an intense, highly precise fear of spiders, let's say, you're very likely to actively avoid situations where you might encounter them.
So you never get the evidence that might challenge your belief.
Exactly. Your action avoidance confirms your prediction. Spiders are terrifying and must be avoided, which minimizes your immediate surprise or anxiety. But it comes at the cost of never updating that potentially false, overly precise belief. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of active inference, maintaining a potentially maladaptive state.
Fascinating. Okay, moving on to consciousness and self. This is where it gets really mind-bending. One of the most intriguing implications of the FEP is how it views the self. It suggests that maybe our highest level generative model, the most overarching hypothesis our brain holds, is simply, I am a thing, I am an agent.
And crucially, this isn't something we're just born with, fully formed. It likely emerges through development. Think about an infant initially. There's probably not a clear distinction between self and other, self and world.
It's all just experience.
Perhaps. And then gradually, the child learns to distinguish itself from its caregivers, recognizing mom is an object separate from me, and that feeling of touch is happening to my hand. That fundamental understanding of me versus not me is an incredibly sophisticated hypothesis that the brain has to learn and then continually validate through prediction and action. It's arguably the highest level belief we form about our own existence and autonomy.
So the very fact that there are others in our world seems crucial for developing this self-awareness. If you were the only thing in the universe, would you need a concept of self?
That's a great thought experiment. Probably not, right? If you lived in a universe with only you, there would be no need to hypothesize, I did that, versus you did that. Every sensation, every action would unambiguously originate from or happen to you.
But because there are other similar agents around,
Exactly. It's the ambiguity introduced by having similar conspecifics, other creatures like yourself, that necessitates a model of self. You need a hypothesis to disambiguate. Did I cause that sensation, or did I make that noise, or did you?
this allows you to contextualize sensory input, make inferences about who is doing what, and crucially, predict the behavior of others by attributing intentions to them based on your model of yourself. Social interaction seems fundamental to constructing our model of self.
And this naturally leads into agency and planning. The ability to plan, to imagine the consequences of actions far into the future, and choose between different possibilities. That seems like a key aspect of what we consider sentient behavior.
Yes, this requires what Friston calls counterfactual depth. It's the ability to model things not just as they are, but as they could be under different scenarios or actions.
Unlike a thermostat, which just reacts. Right. A simple thermostat doesn't plan. It just reacts to the current temperature based on a fixed rule. A virus doesn't really plan. It just replicates according to its programming. But for agents like us, our deep generative models extend into the future. They allow us to simulate the likely outcomes of different policies, different potential courses of action, and choose the one that is predicted to minimize expected free energy down the line.
The one that leads to the most preferred future outcomes and resolves the most uncertainty along the way.
Exactly. This capacity for future-oriented simulation, for weighing alternative futures, is a hallmark of sophisticated intelligence and agency.
So ultimately, this perspective suggests that what we perceive as objective reality is actually our brain's best working fantasy, or maybe less provocatively, its best hypothesis, a constantly updated internal explanation for the stream of sensory data it receives.
That's a fair way to put it. We are, in a very real sense, locked inside our skulls. We don't have direct access to the world out there. All we have are our sensations. Our brain's job is to generate the best possible explanation, the most compelling story or fantasy, for what's causing those sensations.
And the best we can do is try to make sure our fantasy aligns well enough with the fantasies of others.
And with the consequences of our actions in the world, yes. achieving that generalized synchrony we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
Our shared reality emerges from this collective effort to minimize surprise by aligning our internal models, often through language and culture, creating a kind of consensual hallucination, a shared story about what the world is like. It's a very relational view of reality.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about AI, robotics, and even evolution, because the free energy principle seems to have some really exciting implications there, too. It offers a potential blueprint for building intelligence differently.
It absolutely does. The SEP and active inference provide a really compelling biologically inspired or biomimetic framework for building artificial intelligence systems that might genuinely mimic natural intelligence more closely than current approaches.
How so? What would be different?
Well, it could lead to AI that exhibits genuine curiosity, driven by that need to maximize information gain we discussed.
Yeah.
AI that learns incredibly efficiently, perhaps on much less energy. Think of the 20-watt human brain compared to the massive power consumption of current large language models, which Friston sometimes jokes need their own power station.
Right. And AI that engages in true novelty seeking, exploring its environment to reduce uncertainty rather than just matching patterns in massive data sets.
Exactly. It points towards AI that is inherently motivated to understand its world, not just predict the next word in sequence.
So unlike current large language models, which seem to spend roughly the same amount of computation on every word or token.
Regardless of how simple or complex the input is.
Right. An FEP-based AI could potentially adapt its computational effort, devote more processing power to genuinely surprising or complex information.
That's the idea. It could enable much more sophisticated inference, deeper understanding, and more flexible long-term planning, rather than just generating statistically plausible outputs. It feels like a more organic, efficient, and potentially more powerful path towards creating truly intelligent, adaptable machines.
And it's not just about building future AI. You mentioned evolution itself can be viewed through this lens.
Yes, absolutely. You can think of evolution as nature's way of performing Bayesian model selection over vast timescales. The phenotypes, the organisms, their forms and behaviors that persist over generations are effectively those whose underlying generative models best evidence their existence.
Meaning they are good at minimizing surprise within their specific ecological niche.
Precisely. Adaptive fitness, in this view, is essentially the evidence for a particular phenotype's model of its world. It's the probability of finding that kind of organism thriving in that particular environment. The organisms that best predict, navigate, and adapt to their environment are the ones whose models are validated by survival and reproduction. They literally embody a good model of their world.
That makes perfect sense. The ones that successfully predict and act survive. And this framework also neatly explains niche construction, doesn't it? That symmetry where organisms don't just passively adapt, but actively shape their environment.
Indeed, it falls out quite naturally. As an agent acts to minimize its surprise, it inevitably changes its environment. Think about beavers building dams that create wetlands, changing the landscape to make it more predictable and resource-rich for themselves.
Or humans building cities, developing agriculture, creating complex languages.
All examples of niche construction. These actions make the environment more predictable and stable for the inhabitants. And in turn, the environment itself effectively learns about its inhabitants through these persistent changes. It creates this continuous coevolutionary loop, a dynamic dance of mutual prediction and adaptation between agents and their world.
This sounds like it could even offer a kind of natural guardrail for developing ethical AI, maybe, if the core drive is minimizing surprise within a shared ecosystem.
That's a really interesting and hopeful perspective, yes. The core principle of mutual predictability that emerges within the FEP framework could offer a natural constraint.
How so?
Well, if AI systems are designed to minimize expected surprise, not just for themselves, but within an entire ecosystem of agents, including humans, then their actions would naturally be biased towards behaviors that promote stability, sustainability, and mutual understanding. They would need to become predictable to us, just as we become predictable to them.
To avoid catastrophic surprises for anyone in the system.
Exactly. The objective function shifts towards minimizing joint-free energy, leading inevitably towards shared generative models and mutual predictability. It suggests a pathway towards alignment based on shared understanding and predictability, which is quite different from many of the control-based approaches discussed in AI safety. It's about finding common ground.
That's a really hopeful and thought-provoking vision for the future of AI, grounded in these fundamental principles. Outro.
So today, we've really journeyed through the profound and I think quite expansive landscape of the free energy principle and active inference. We've seen how these ideas offer an incredibly unifying account of existence itself.
Yeah, from the fundamental dance of molecules and single-celled organisms organizing themselves, all the way up to the incredibly intricate workings of the human brain, the mystery of consciousness, the foundations of mental well-being, and even the potential future of artificial intelligence.
It all seems to circle back to this core idea. Systems constantly striving to make sense of their world, to predict it, and to act in ways that confirm those predictions, ultimately evidencing their own existence by minimizing surprise.
It really reveals a universe of systems, biological, artificial, maybe even social, continuously predicting, acting, learning, and adapting in this ceaseless effort to persist and thrive.
And this perspective suggests something quite deep about us, doesn't it? That curiosity, the ability to learn, and maybe most importantly, a willingness to update our models of the world. Our beliefs aren't just useful cognitive skills we happen to possess.
They're fundamental imperatives, requirements for existence and resilience itself.
That seems to be the implication, yeah.
So thinking about what this all means for you, listening right now, consider this provocative thought from Professor Friston himself. It's a maxim that really seems to encapsulate so much of what we've discussed today. Keep your options open.
It sounds simple, but it captures that idea we touched on about maximizing entropy within the model. The notion that a flexible, adaptable, maybe high entropy model of the world, one that embraces uncertainty, actively seeks out new information and is genuinely prepared to revise even its deepest beliefs when the evidence warrants it, is fundamentally key.
Key to adaptability, to learning, to resilience.
Whether you're a complex human brain trying to navigate your daily life, or a cutting-edge artificial intelligence learning about its environment, or perhaps even a whole society grappling with complex global challenges, that flexibility seems crucial.
It's a really powerful reminder, isn't it? That genuine curiosity, the intellectual courage to update your beliefs when faced with new, surprising evidence, and that willingness to remain open to new possibilities. These aren't just abstract intellectual pursuits.
No, perhaps they are the most fundamental strategies we have for navigating, adapting to, and truly thriving in this wonderfully complex, inherently unpredictable, and endlessly surprising world we find ourselves in.